The arrow shot through the trees before any of them had a chance to realise what was going on. It hit a perfect bullseye on Raidin's shield before dropping to the ground and hissing as the poison tips simmered into the sandy ground. Sharm pulled her staff from her back and squinted against the sun into the thickness of trees and vines. Another arrow hissed past her so close she could smell the acidic poison. "We're under attack!" she cried as she called for her demon. Swirling streams of purple light surrounded her as the succubus tore into their world. The others were stood tensely, weapons at the ready. The final arrow landed at Athenist's feet. It had a note attached to the quill. He quickly grabbed it up and read it out loud. Gurubashi Arena. The 5 of them entered the arena and stopped. Parantaya stood closely behind Crowan, her eyes dark and tense. Crowan's arm hung back protectively around her. Raidin stood at the front, slowly swinging his mace, ready for action. Athenist had taken stance next to Sharm, alert and constantly scanning the arena walls. The hunter nimbly dropped from the wall and into the arena. Her camouflage slowly dissipated as she allowed both herself and her beast to be seen. Her comrades slunk forward behind the hunter, advancing like wolves in the shadows. Sharm observed them. Hunter, Death Knight, a fellow warlock and a rogue. She could sense Athenist's hyped energy beside her and feared he would leap into battle at any moment. She looked at him and shook her head slowly. Raidin took a steady step forward, his armour clanking. "Yours?" he asked to the hunter, throwing the poisoned arrow at her feet. Silence ensued. The hunter's beast snarled softly, his coat shimmering with each breath it took. The hunter, too, took a confident step forward. "Want some more?" she smiled before lifting her arrow with a lightning speed and letting 3 arrows fly directly at Raidin's face. Athenist jumped forward and swung his scepter towards the hunter's neck. She flung herself backwards as her spirit beast leapt up onto Athenist, knocking him to the ground. The beast roared into his throat, jaws open wide. The hunter's allies began slinking forward towards Athenist. The rogue screamed a war cry before vanishing into the tense air. Raidin growled and moved in to intercept the Death Knight, who had her eyes fixed intently on him. He slammed his shield forward and knocked her backwards, skidding on her heels. Sharm's succubus waited obediently for her commands. Her pointed tail flicked dangerously behind her like a spearhead. Sharm nodded at her silently. The succubus moved with nimble grace towards the spirit beast atop Athenist and lashed out hard. Her claws sunk into the beast's back and she chuckled loudly. Crowan ran to Athenist to help him to his feet. He wasn't badly wounded, but his stamina was drained. Sharm watched as the hunter sprinted high along the walls and released arrow after arrow. They smashed into the ground with mighty force. Breathing deeply, Sharm unleashed a burst of fire spells, each one trailing up towards the hunter like snakes. They distorted the surroundings with heat, making the air shimmer and shake. The Death Knight gripped Raidin towards her and smiled wickedly as he was pulled through the air. She drew her axes and spun them on her fingers as he landed. Crouching low, she feigned left and right as Raidin tried to land a blow. He sliced his mace down and along the ground, and then lifted it high into the air, spraying sand into the Death Knight's eyes. The Death Knight cried out angrily, retreating slightly whilst wiping her eyes. The hunter held her gaze on Sharm, bow poised. Her beast paced at her side, eager to engage. Sharm noticed the hunter flick her head quickly at her beast. "Go," she commanded to her succubus. As she ran towards the spirit beast, the succubus blew a gentle kiss towards it and chuckled as the spirit beast sluggishly tried to swipe at her. Sharm began moving carefully towards the hunter. The hunter's bow followed her, completely locked down. Suddenly, she released a carefully aimed arrow for Sharm's heart. It danced through the air and Sharm barely had time to teleport herself out of its path before it hit the ground a couple of inches away from where she had been stood. A scream rang out behind her. "Crowan!" Parantia slumped forward onto her knees. The other warlock and rogue were unleashing a double attack on her. They had been waiting silently in the shadows for their moment to pounce. The rogue's daggers moved so fast behind Parantia that they blurred. The warlock's demon had circled in and had locked down all of Parantia's abilities to heal her wounds. Bolts of shadow spun out from the warlock's hands as he cast relentlessly. Parantia stood up, weakly trying to heal herself, but the rogue span around and dropped her heel mercilessly into Parantia's back, knocking her back down again. Crowan raced to Parantia's side and swung his mace at the rogue. She quickly slipped back into the air, leaving no trace. He roared as he tore into the demon's flesh with his weapon, lifting it clean off the ground and flinging it away. The demon let out a wicked snarl as it blooded the sand around it. Crowan lifted Parantia from the ground and pulled her away from the fray. Sharm watched tensely as the Death Knight swung madly at Raiden, whilst the warlock turned his attentions to Atheist. Atheist looked drained, but Raiden was completely pumped. He pushed forward strongly with his shield and mace and made confident moves against the Death Knight's reckless swings. He raised his shield above his head and brought it down on the Death Knight heavily. She dodged, but it caught her shoulder and she cried out, swinging her mace into a thoughtless counterattack but missing. Athenis sprung forward and brought his scepter down onto her other shoulder, completely handicapping her. The warlock moved backwards slightly as Raiden and Athenis advanced on him. Sharm brought up the rear, casting small spells of fellfire that simmered off of the warlock's robes. The rogue reappeared by the hunter's side and began hurling small daggers at them. Stronger as one, they stuck together and began laying into the warlock. Without his demon, the warlock struggled. He tried to cast, but Raiden slammed his shield into him. A dagger narrowly missed Sharm's arm, slicing slightly through her cloth braces. The warlock knew he was cornered. He teleported himself up beside the hunter and the rogue, looking down angrily at the three of them. Sharm looked back. Crowan was leaning over a very pale Parantia. His face was completely distraught. "We have to get out of here," Sharm said to Raiden and Atheist. The hunter waved her hand in dismissal at the rogue and warlock. The Death Knight looked up at her, holding her shoulder in complete agony before dragging herself into the shadows of the walls. Letting out a laugh, the hunter turned and jumped out of the arena. Sharm could hear her beast roar deep into the jungle. Her succubus walked calmly towards her, but Sharm could see she had a slight limp. "Rest now," she said softly as she dismissed her. The three of them rushed over to where Crowan was cradling Parantia. "Oh my God," Sharm whispered as she drew near. "We have to get her to Stormwind now."